During the early 2010s, we saw the rise of a rebellious method of video game creation, Kickstarter. The platform opened doors to new possibilities. Prior to Kickstarter, if you wanted a game to be funded, you needed deep pockets or a corporate overlord who would most likely strip mine your creativity for massive profits. A trade-off that became increasingly popular. With Kickstarter, however, all you needed was an idea that captivated your target audience enough to dip into their own pockets up front. And since the pitch of your idea would directly correlate to how much money the public would give you, those ideas ranged from humble to outrageous. Inevitably, some people used this platform for good, to prove that there were people and ideas out there that could shake up the industry, and some used it for bad, to enrich themselves or to lie to hopeful fans. This is a story about one of those ideas, but was it created for good reasons or bad? Let's find out.
Hello? A sponsorship? No, man, I'm out of the game. It's been a year. Raid Shadow Legend? No, I'm good. They're offering how much money? Oh my god.
4.6 out of 5 on the Google Play Store with almost 2 million reviews. 4.7 on the Apple Store with 450,000 reviews. Completely free to play. Over 700 unique champions to collect from different factions. Bosses to fight, players to battle. Constant updates. That's Raid. But now with even more, because recently they added a new tier of champion, a brand new rarity called Mythical Champions. They have this new mechanic called Metamorph, which lets them change between two different forms, kind of like how Kickstarter games change between hopeful dreams and absolute nightmares, but cooler and with less angry people. These mythical champions are summoned from the brand new primal shards in the portal. They share the same artifacts, accessories, masteries and blessings, and they're the most versatile champions in the game, allowing you to tailor your playstyle and create synergies like never before. You can even take advantage of the promotion that they're running right now. Not only will you get Sun Wukong, a legendary champion, totally free if you log on for 7 different days from now until October 23rd, but there's even more. Click the link in the video description or scan the QR code on screen and then enter code JTSKIN before October 7th to receive the Stag Knight for free, one of the best epic champions in the game, as well as his special skin. You'll even get a free starter pack with this in-game loot. So thank you very much to Raid for sponsoring this video, and on with the content. On August 12th, 2013, the Kickstarter website saw a newly listed game development project with a simple and yet brilliant title, Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix is a JRPG with a squad-based RTS game design brought to you by veteran developers and creators from the East and the West. The project goal was set at a meager sum of $100,000, clearly an absurdly low amount for what they were planning to build, but people didn't know any better yet. For context, Kickstarter, as I record this video in 2023, is not the same Kickstarter that Project Phoenix launched on almost a decade ago. If an ambitious project asked for $100,000 now, it would likely be laughed at instead of being funded. Back then, however, Kickstarter was a new frontier, one that was seeing incredible success for very little substance. You had everything from legendary developers arriving with lofty promises to unknown strangers with reasonable expectations, and no one seemed to know what was possible, or most importantly, for how much. Projects like Richard Garrett's Shroud of the Avatar had already raised close to $2 million. Chris Roberts' Star Citizen was already in the tens of millions of dollars of crowdfunding, and dozens of games each month were being funded successfully. The hype was real. Of course, in hindsight, no project manager worth their salt would claim to create a AAA game for $100,000 unless they were lying or just lowballing the goal in order to get a successful funding window. You see, Kickstarter works on an all or nothing basis. If you set it at $100,000 and it gets 99,000 in pledges by the end date, everyone's refunded and the creator gets nothing. Which means you are incentivized by the platform to lowball your actual goal and just hope you raise more money than you advertise as needed. A critical flaw in the system for the crucial component of transparency. This essentially means if you do pass your lowballed goal but know that you need more, the game will be unlikely to materialize, but the backers will still be out of pocket for what they rightfully assumed was a completely funded project. As for Project Phoenix specifically, just why was their goal so unreasonable?
Project Phoenix is a revolutionary Japanese role-playing game, combining scope-based real-time strategy mechanics with a grand expansive world, compelling story, amazing soundtrack, and a fun, intuitive gameplay. You can expect the best people to be working on this project. Top designers, artists, programmers, and composers from around the world coming together to create an authentic, original JRPG experience.
First, on the face of it all, a game created to AAA standards and claiming to leverage, quote, top Eastern and Western creators who have worked on many blockbuster game titles, is a work of complete fiction. $100,000 in the real world of business is a month of a medium-sized studio salary budget for full-time workers. Sure, it sounds like a large sum of money to a lot of people, and especially for a crowdfunding campaign in 2013, but in reality, it's really nothing. Not even enough to hire a single senior top talent programmer in any large developed city. So why did people expect a full game for this price? Well, pretty simply, it's because that's what they were told, and people didn't know any better, at least yet. The red flags are actually worse though. You see, the project also claimed to have talent who worked on some of the most prestigious, expensive, and beloved game franchises on the entire planet, meaning they are unlikely to be low-paid, entry-level employees or hobbyists, which would also increase the budget. Not only this, but Project Phoenix also promised to launch on multiple devices: Windows, Mac, Linux, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, iOS, and Android, as well as fully voice-acted in Japanese and English, with subtitles for those as well as German, bringing a massive additional cost to the creation that would elevate even the most reasonable indie game to a much larger budget. All of this combined made the project an incredibly unreasonable ask. But remember, it's 2013, there had been no scams or complete failures from this new frontier, and people were just simply too excited about the possibilities. When you then add in credible names of people who would of course never harm their reputation for just a little bit of cash, you could get funding now for basically anything based on that. It essentially came down to this: the flashier the trailer, the more heartfelt the pitch, the easier it was to hook an audience. For this reason, Project Phoenix managed to raise just over $1 million in their 30-day funding window, reaching close to 16,000 JRPG fans, some of which decided to hand over $10,000 each to have their chance to design characters within the game, as well as to access launch parties and more. Reading the Kickstarter page, it's clear to see that the creator knew exactly what to leverage in order to win hearts and minds, how exactly to stoke the ashes in just the right way, causing the phoenix to rise. The pitch speaks of a revolution in the gaming industry, setting new standards of excellence for the Japanese market, bypassing large gaming studios and going back to when games were designed with love, passion, and interest rather than corporate money grubbing. To forsake new technologies that made games prettier but more shallow, to go back to what made us all fall in love with games to begin with. An incredibly compelling message, one built upon emotion, from a roster of individuals who would demand immediate respect for their contribution to our enjoyment as gamers. And you too could be part of this revolution, a part of this history. All you needed to do was pledge. People even ignored very realistic red flags. For one, the team page was fleshed out with names and faces who would connect back to games like LA Noire, Final Fantasy, Halo, Crysis, Super Smash Bros, Skyrim, Assassin's Creed, Metal Gear Solid, and more. But for the names listed, there were also some that were hidden. Actually, the most important names: the lead programmer and art supervisor were left blank, stating they could not announce the involvement until much later in development. Strange. But who cares, right? With so much experience and such a fantastically crafted Kickstarter page, there's no way anything could go wrong. Especially since they said all the right things. Especially since these people really cared. But believing them was simply a mistake. A mistake that took an incredibly insane journey from beginning to end. A mistake that backers could not believe, and are still angry about to this very day. This was it. The moment everyone had waited for was finally here. The JRPG to change the world, to revolutionize the industry, and it had arrived. As you would expect, the comments on this video are brutal. The downvotes tell the story of expectations versus reality, the tightrope that is walked when selling a warm, comfortable dream, but delivering the cold wet truth of reality like a bucket of ice water to the face. This gameplay was unbelievably different to what people expected. How could it be this bad over a year into the proposed 2-year development time? Some people who defended the project would give a clear answer. This was just a demo, designed specifically actually to raise additional funds through VC, venture capital. But no one who already had the sunk cost of buying this project would be giving it more, let alone newcomers with a keen eye for a deal. To begin with, this was confusing, as chasing VC money and investors contradicted the entire idea of crowdfunding from Kickstarter. This was sold as being unshackled from corporate business interest, but was already seeking to return, essentially using the public's money to create the carrot to lure in the suit-wearing horses. That, however, was the least of people's concerns. You see, when angling to raise money, you would put your absolute best foot forward, and if this was the best foot of Project Phoenix, it might need to be amputated. Still, some fans remained hopeful, recognising that this was early footage and things could change. Things would change. It must. By early 2015, around a year and a half after the Phoenix had risen, people were starting to ask difficult questions. These questions would often hang in the air like an ominous presence, rarely finding answers. The creator of the Project Phoenix Kickstarter and CEO of Studio CIA, Creative Intelligence Arts, Hiroaki Yora, had launched and received full funding for yet another Kickstarter project just a year after the Project Phoenix success. This time, it was for an anime science fiction thriller called Under the Dog. UTG asked for $580,000 this time for a singular 24-minute episode, but instead received $878,000 from just over 12,000 eager backers. Despite the success of the UTG Kickstarter, many people from Project Phoenix were very angry about this situation. So far, all that they had received from Project Phoenix was a terrible vertical slice of gameplay that existed to try to lure in additional funding, some music, and of course some empty promises. Now the creators were going to be spreading themselves thin with a second project, as well as taking more money from the public, despite not delivering for what they'd already sold. It just wasn't right, but what could they do except for wait? Maybe it would turn out to be okay. But as people waited, things started to go from bad to worse. The studio tasked with creating the animation from the second Kickstarter had already parted ways with the project, citing, quote, creative differences. According to this quote, there was a high possibility of money not being enough to actually fulfill backer rewards, as well as, quote, practically no budget set aside for operational costs, which the writer concludes would probably mean that they were assuming to have work done by volunteers. This left backers of Project Phoenix asking very important questions. Where did the almost $900,000 go if there was no budget for operational costs? And most importantly, if the animation was so badly mismanaged, what state was the game going to be in with the same leadership? Hiroaki Yora rushed to announce these concerns in a Kickstarter post dedicated to creating a merch store for the thus far failed to materialize Project Phoenix. In this, he said that, quote, we want to ensure you that nothing on Under the Dog will affect Project Phoenix going forward. He then ended it with a call for game developers to look forward to chances to work at the studio, a very concerning update considering the date of February 12th, 2015, just months away from the scheduled release date for the full game. This was just the base of the cake though. The very confusing icing was about to come 5 days later, when they announced a call for Unreal Engine developers. You might think, why is this a big deal? Well, if we rewind to the initial Kickstarter pitch, you're going to notice that the development was being conducted in Unity, a completely different game engine entirely. This was accompanied by a quote that reads, "Our lead programmer is a leading Unity programmer in the world and is constantly being asked to join the Unity team." This is incredibly significant. You see, changing a game engine is a massive, massive undertaking, one that you would not do unless you had very little work complete or had no other option, especially when they were 18 months into full-scale production. A change to the game engine could mean most of the work that they completed thus far would need to be almost entirely recreated, wasting precious resources on an already underfunded project. The reason for this will all become very clear a little bit later, but for now, it was yet another red flag for Project Phoenix. One that was yet again addressed by the ever-present and vocal leader, Hiroaki Yora. Unity had a lot of underdeveloped tools we need to create the game, so our team made a decision to move to Unreal, which would cut development time and mess a lot. Now we fast forward through some of the quiet times to the next major update on Project Phoenix, August 19th, 2015. Almost 2 years since Hiroaki Yora raised over 10 times his initial budget to birth Project Phoenix, and today, this is what they had to show for it. Clearly a game that by late 2015 looked almost unrecognisable from dime a dozen iOS and Android game releases, and absolutely nothing like the future of JRPGs that fans expected to see. The comments, of course, reflected the disappointment from backers, many of which pointed out that the game on display was vastly inferior to what other Kickstarter projects had produced, with less money and none of the claimed AAA development talent of Project Phoenix. This was just the beginning though, as the bad news kept on coming. On December 11th, 2015, the prolific investigative games journalist Jason Schreier posted an article outing the current state of CIA's miserable situation. The previous mysterious Unity developer was, in fact, David Clarke from Moon Studios, creator of indie sensation game Ori and the Blind Forest. According to Hiroaki Yora, from the very beginning of the Kickstarter, they had been waiting on Clarke to come on board and dedicate his time to creating Project Phoenix, but to this date, he'd simply not been able to transition from his own work, meaning the project had been without a lead programmer since the very beginning. Instead of filling this void, they simply waited for a 14-month delay, then waited some more before finally deciding to move on, bringing the total wait to over 2 years for a developer who never materialized. To many, this email to Schreier proved Hiroaki Yora to have been telling half-truths at best and lies at worst since the very beginning. He had claimed the game would be created by this mysterious developer, released just 2 years after the Kickstarter ended, but never had the developer hired or available, and yet continued to claim things were going to plan, despite still not having the most important piece in the game development puzzle. This now explained why they were swapping from Unity 18 months into development, because the Unity programmer they waited almost 2 years for never arrived. All of that time and money had been wasted, without a word to the backers. The Schreier article ended with Yora claiming to have a new programmer, a revelation that the game was just a part-time project with increased scope, and an itinerary of the game's development. He even said in the email that this was purely a weekend job, which turned to be a shocking reveal to the fans. According to those fans, at no point during this Kickstarter did they claim the project would be part-time. Maybe to the discerning few, of course, $100,000 would not have been enough for even part-time talent to create a game of this scale, but when the Kickstarter raised $1 million and never mentioned otherwise, people of course would have expected the game to be the focus of those involved. After all, they said 100k in 2 years would get the game done, so how does 1 million in 2 years not get the game done? Overall, this information was a slap in the face for everybody. People eventually went back and proofread the Kickstarter page, looking for any information that would indicate otherwise. The only line in the entire $1 million pitch that could even be read in this manner is as follows. Each member of our team has taken a creative leap of faith in joining the project. Many of them have taken time out of their personal schedule to contribute their expertise toward Project Phoenix's success. For the backers, they did not consider this to be sufficient disclosure that the project was a weekend job for the entire team. They of course felt betrayed by the revelation, and with this, 2015 ended, and with it, any meaningful updates for quite a while. By this point, the community had mostly given up. They thought it was over, that the Phoenix had stalled, and all hope was lost.
僕がボランティアとして開発に参加しているシミュレーションゲームタイニーメタルがついにキックスターターで発表されることになって大変嬉しく思っています。
On September 19th, 2016, a new game appeared on the forever changed website Kickstarter. By this time, most of the initial hype of the platform had been killed by those who exploited the early adopters' naivety, hype, and goodwill. Projects had come with nothing but ideas, raised millions of dollars, and delivered nothing but disappointment. The users who remained to back projects without clearly solid foundation was now dwindling, and belief in anything crowdfunded was at an all-time low. This didn't stop Area 34 Incorporated though, and their new project Tiny Metal, asking for a very small goal of $50,000 to bring a recreation of Nintendo's incredibly popular Advance Wars series. This project claimed to have a host of industry veterans, many of which were apparently unable to declare their identity or involvement with the project. They also claimed to have been involved in some, quote, epic-scale JRPGs, adventure games and fighting games we have developed and continue to work on. Tiny Metal also had the goal of creating something that big companies simply would not do, to take a neglected genre from the past and give it the love that it deserves. In hindsight, the pitch looked and read almost identical to Project Phoenix, an almost beat-for-beat recreation, though not a single name connection with each other. Unlike Project Phoenix though, Tiny Metal was a product of its time. They failed to reach their funding goal of $50,000 within the 30-day window and walked away without a penny of the public's money. Proof that despite a great trailer, big names, and a ton of effort in the campaign with a low cost, people were mostly done with trusting game development on this website. Looking back at Project Phoenix and their situation during this time, it was now April 23rd, 2017, almost 4 years since the funding and over 2 years late for delivery. There was no more gameplay to show, simply a text update from Daniel Dresler, far too long to go over here. Essentially, he talked about the money, which was short, development, which was mismanaged, and plans that didn't work out. There was also a hint that was dropped within that no one put together until a little bit later. Essentially, the word tiny is said repeatedly, claiming that they already had a new team using new money, and with this new tiny game, they would be raising money from investors and sales in order to finally finish Project Phoenix with better and higher quality assets and features. The message ends with a massive new problem. We've seen other projects release at quality below fans' expectations, and we are putting our all into avoiding such a fate. In other words, they expected fans to not only believe that this is a reason for no release, but to be thankful for it, that they as developers were worried about fan expectations being too high for what they had created, so instead they were going to release nothing, at least for now. The proposed solution from Daniel was that if the tiny project was successful, as they hoped, Project Phoenix would be delivered, which you can read between the lines. This also said, if the tiny project wasn't successful, Project Phoenix would not be delivered, which now made this incredibly convoluted. Essentially, they had a first Kickstarter which claimed to need $100,000, which raised $1 million, then a second Kickstarter which raised $800,000 for an unrelated anime. But still, they were saying that they needed more, and nothing could really prepare fans for what was about to happen next. In September of 2017, Hiroaki Yora appeared at PAX West for an interview with PC Gamer. If you now look on screen, nowhere is CIA or Project Phoenix mentioned in the overlay. Instead, it states CEO/producer Area 35, which is the new name for Tiny Metal Studio. A studio that he was clearly involved with the entire time, but decided to leave his name out of the Kickstarter, most likely due to knowing how fans would react if he was involved in a third Kickstarter after not delivering on Kickstarter 1 and Kickstarter 2 seeing terrible reviews. This was all made official when Tiny Metal was linked back to the Project Phoenix Kickstarter page where they asked for people's support. This game was now the lifeline and saviour. Initially there was of course anger, but some fans tried to give it a go, and they asked Yora if they would be getting a free copy of the game since they'd backed the Project Phoenix and not gotten anything in return as of yet, or likely never would, to which he said no, they would not be getting a copy of the game and instead would need to buy it just like everybody else. This of course enraged fans that already had many reasons to be angry. In order to try to stop the growing hate, Yora posted a message for backers. Tiny Metal is our only salvation. With so little resources, many staff from Project Phoenix has toiled to make a simple yet fun little game, and this is our result. If you truly like what we've made, please help us. We need all the help we can get. We don't want your money, we just need you to tell your friends and family. But of course they did want their money, and they wanted their friends and family's money too. Which is why this did not stop the onslaught of fan messages. The situation in their eyes was very clear. He took $1 million of their money, wasted much of it, and then used the rest to create an entirely unrelated game. They called him a thief, a liar, a cheat, and a fraud. He of course denied all of this, and for now, it was case closed, because the public would feel cheated no matter what, and the studio would deny all wrongdoings. Without an admission of guilt, an insider, or a forensic accounting of where the money went, nobody could make fact from fiction, so it seemed like it was all over. November 2017, an ex-employee takes to Facebook to air their grievances. Tariq Lacey, who worked at Area 35, made some outrageous claims, backing up the fans' fears as well as their accusations. Quote, "The company's CEO, Hiroaki Yora, asked me to deflect any accusations that this money was from anyone other than private investors. In actuality, Hiroaki only dipped into his funds and asked for money from private investors after the funding that he had secured for Tiny Metal was running low. I refused this request to fabricate and minimize the truth for the purpose of misleading others, then told Hiroaki to remove me from all matters regarding Project Phoenix so that I would not be implicated in this affair. The response to this by fans was of course mutinous. As for Yora's response as the CEO, he came with accusations of his own. He said this was factually incorrect and that the whistleblower had to be bought out of his own contract for, quote, being a toxic employee who was sexually harassing female staff amongst many other problems, a statement which he later apologised for. Now there were rumours in the air that gave credence to fans' fears, and in order to put all these rumours of fraud or misconduct to bed, Yora took to an interview with GameSpot, where he allegedly shared private documents of financials and investor agreements in order to vindicate himself and his company from wrongdoings. Unfortunately, this GameSpot article does not at any point back up any of the claims made with their assessment on whether or not these documents prove or disprove any claims made or denied. They just state that some documents were shown, which leaves much to be desired in terms of proof and likely changed almost no minds in the court of public opinion. That is, of course, until July 2018, where PC Gamer published an article confirming that previous Facebook whistleblower Tariq Lacey was forced by court-ordered arbitration to issue an apology and retraction for all claims related to embezzlement from Project Phoenix funds to create Tiny Metal in Area 35. This legally vindicated Hiroaki Yora and Studio CIA, though for the sake of clarity, I will give you the opinion of those online. Many people claim that despite this arbitration and court-ordered apology, it could be the case that in the face of legal action, cost and threat, an apology and walkaway was preferred. But as for a legal matter, Yora, CIA and Area 35 are cleared of any and all wrongdoing, despite how the public may feel. Which of course, if you read the comments anywhere about this project, most will be angry, most will call fraud, most will say they were cheated out of their money, and that that money went to create a totally different game. Since there is no compelling conclusion, it's for you to make up your own mind. At the end of it all, despite the apparent success of Tiny Metal, which was claimed to bring life back into the never-risen Phoenix, there has been no progress. The last update on the Project Phoenix Kickstarter was posted on March 26, 2019, in which claims were made of focusing on alternative products before bringing focus back to Project Phoenix. Essentially, yet again, moving the goalposts further away, into a distance that none of the original backers can even imagine, let alone see. We now end 10 years later, a decade, $1 million, 16,000 backers, 3 Kickstarters, an anime, an entirely different game, success, and yet no refunds and certainly no Phoenix. Many of the names associated with the project are now working on bigger and better things, likely never to return to a game that never really seemed to exist in any meaningful way. A dream was presented, money exchanged hands, but only disappointment was returned. This is the story of Project Phoenix, a story that I think we can say is finished, though with Kickstarter shenanigans, I guess you never really know.